In this video, I'm going to give you a list of types of questions and topics that might show up on GED Social Studies to help you pass faster so you can move ahead to bigger and better things, and we're starting now. Before we begin, please know that unfortunately, there's no way to know exactly which types of questions will show up on the version of the test that you get. This list is meant to give you a starting point and to help you get an idea of what you can expect on GED Social Studies, but please keep in mind that there may be types of questions that come up on your test that weren't covered in this list. Now, to start us off here, one type of question is based on the information which statement is an opinion. You might get a question like this on your test. On the other hand, they can also ask you which statement is a fact. Fact and opinion questions are fair game on GED Social Studies. You might also have to read and answer a question like, which of the following is not supported by the passage? One tip I have is to try a process of elimination on questions like these. Similarly, they could ask you something like, which of the following statements is supported by the passage? Another type of question is which conclusion is best supported by the information in the passage, or it could be an article or a graph. It could even be a picture or a map or an advertisement or something like that. It could also be a combination where they give you, say, a passage and a picture, and you have to use both to figure out which conclusion is best supported. It's fair game for them to ask you questions involving both text and a picture of some sort. Another type of question is what does the word blank mean in the passage? So they might give you a vocabulary word like veto, for example. What does the word veto mean in the passage? Now, I don't know that you'll really get that exact word. I just made that up off the top of my head just to give you an example here. But the idea is that the test might give you a word, and that word could show up in the passage, or it could also show up in a picture, and the test will require you to figure out what that word means. Inference questions are also fair game on GED Social Studies. So the test might give you different pieces of information and ask you to infer what's most likely to happen in the future. Another question type is based on the passage, which word or phrase identifies an unstated purpose? In this question type, the author's purpose for writing a passage isn't spelled out directly, so you'll have to figure out what it is. You might also get order of events questions. So for example, you'll have to read an article and then answer something like, which event in the article happened third? Connection questions could also come up on your test. So the test might require you to identify connections between people, places, or events. For example, they might give you questions where you have to determine if earlier events cause something later on. These could be cause and effect type questions. Another question type is which of the following is a main idea of the passage. Also, you could get a question that asks you something like this. Which of the following would the author of the passage most likely agree on? On the other hand, they could ask you which of the following would the author of this passage most likely disagree on. The test might also have questions where you're given two sources and asked which idea was mentioned in one but not the other. So for example, according to the articles provided, which of these concepts is stated in Article A but not Article B? Now, when you're reading a passage or article, you might get questions about the writer's point of view. Also, you could get questions about propaganda and bias. Questions with graphs and charts. Mean, median, mode, and range questions are also fair game for GED Social Studies, and we're going to look at an example of how to find each one. And the purpose of this part of the video is just to give you a foundation for mean, median, mode, and range. These aren't necessarily meant to be the same difficulty as what you'll see on the test. That being said, if you understand these basic examples, I think it'll help you out if you get harder examples on the real test. So now I want to walk through an example of how to calculate the mean. And if you get a mean calculation on your social studies test, I would expect that it's going to be harder than this one, but I want to provide this example here to help build a foundation. So if you'd like to, you can pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll go over it. Feel free to use a calculator if you'd like to. Okay, so how do we find the mean? Well, what we have to do is add up all of the numbers, and then we're going to count up how many numbers we have, and that's what we're going to divide by. So again, the first step here is just to add up all of the numbers. So I'm going to do 5 plus 2 plus 3 plus 8 plus 2. And I'm going to divide this by the total number of numbers. So let's count up how many numbers I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to divide by 5. So again, the way to get the mean is to add up all of the numbers in your data set and then divide by the total number of numbers. Okay, so let's add these up here. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 3 is 10, plus 8 is 18, plus 2 is 20, and of course you can use a calculator to do that too. So we'd have 20 divided by 5, which is 4. So the answer here is 4. The next example is, what is the median for the following data set? And calculators are fair game for this question if you want to use one. So let me give you a chance now, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. So for this median example here, the purpose is to build a foundation with median. That's why I'm including this in this video. So the first step for median questions like this one is to put the numbers in order from smallest to largest. So that's the first thing that I'm doing here. So again, for a median question like this one, the first thing to do is to put the numbers in order from smallest to largest. So now that I have the numbers in order from smallest to largest, I see that I've got an odd number of numbers here, right? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different numbers. So in this case, I don't have to calculate anything because I can simply pick out the middle number. So what if we had an even number of numbers? Like what if let's say we didn't have this 2 here, and you just had 5, 2, 3, and 8. Well, the first step would be the same. The first step would be to put them in order from smallest to largest. And then after that, what you'd have to do, since we've got an even number of numbers here, is take the two numbers in the middle and you'd have to add them up and divide by 2. Now, for the sake of time, I won't do that here, but just keep in mind that if you have an odd number of numbers here, once you've put them in order from smallest to largest, you just pick out the middle number and you're done. But if you've got an even number of numbers here, after you've put them in order from smallest to largest, you want to pick out the two numbers in the middle, add them up, and divide by 2, and that's the median. So next, I want to look at an example to help build a foundation with mode. What is the mode for the following data set? So let me give you a chance now, if you'd like to pause the video, try to figure this out, take all the time you need, and then whenever you're ready, just unpause the video and we'll talk about it. Okay, so for mode here, what we have to remember is that mode is the most occurring number. So when I look at the data set here, I see 5 shows up once, 3 shows up once, and 8 shows up once, but I see that 2 shows up twice, right? So we have two 2's here. So 2 is the mode. Next, let's look at an example of how to find the range. So the purpose of this again is to build a foundation with range, and calculators are fair game here if you want to use one. So let me give you a chance now, if you'd like to pause the video, try to find the range, and whenever you're ready, just unpause it. And if you're not sure how to do this, absolutely no worries, because we're just going to go over it. So how do we find the range? Well, what we want to do here is we want to find the biggest number and the smallest number, and we're going to subtract. So to get the range here, we have to do 8 minus 2. And 8 minus 2 is 6. So the range here is 6. Now, on one of my older GED social studies videos, a test taker commented and shared a breakdown, and it's still an accurate breakdown today, so I wanted to share this here. And the test taker wrote, government and civic 50%, US history 20%, economic 15%, and geography 15%. So I just wanted to share that. What are some of the topics that might come up on GED social studies? Well, next, I'm going to give you a list to help you get an idea of some of the topics that might come up. But before I do that, I just want to say this. Unfortunately, there's no way to know exactly which topics will show up on the version of the test you get. There may be topics on the test not included in this list. So with that being said, here's a list to help you get started. U.S. history, exploration and colonization, the American Revolutionary War, westward expansion, the Civil War, industrialization in the 1800s, World War I and II, the Great Depression, the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s, and that brings us to mean, median, mode, and range, which is fair game for not just social studies but also science and math, government, Declaration of Independence, branches of government, elections, basic economics, supply and demand, markets, recessions and depressions, banking, stock market, and interest rates, labor and consumer issues, collective bargaining, strikes, conservation of resources, renewable versus non-renewable resources, and endangered species. And if you're wondering, how am I going to remember all this? Well, the good news is that according to the GED testing service, the social studies test is not a memorization test. For example, you won't need to memorize the capitals of countries or dates that events occurred, but given some information about an event, you might need to use that in drawing conclusions. And the testing service also says you'll need to apply social studies concepts, know how to read graphs and charts displaying social studies data, and use reasoning to interpret social studies information.